Taser approved!
Alrighty, so our next question now, we are now recording once again. Tammy, you have one more question?
Yeah, the question is, Dr. Meldrum, how do you balance your job and your work and being a Bigfoot celebrity and all the obligations involved in that? And does it allow you to continue to spend the time in the field that you like to do?
Well, when I stay focused on editorship responsibility, I think those are important contributions that to the scientific community, to my colleagues, to continue to bring this subject to the fore and to involve their dialogue in in this ongoing investigation. So I try to be very careful that when I'm when I'm doing appearances or when I'm doing speaking engagements, that those are on weekends on my own time for the most part. And so far, no. It would be great to have an extra 10 hours in every day, but it would just fill up anyway. It's always a balancing act, and I don't always get everything done that I would like to get done, but mine is not a 9-to-5 job. I mean, I'm always reading things at home or correcting papers at home or whatnot, and I do have the luxury, though, of having some extra free time in the summertime when we're between semesters. I often have to teach a summer course. We have some offerings during our summer session, but that usually only takes a 4-week block, and then I have 2.5 months that I can devote to other things, including field work. So that thankfully that correlates with the weather, especially here in the Intermountain West, so that we can get out and do the things we want to do in the summer months. Always trying to meet a deadline or prepare for a commitment, and still stay on top of all the other responsibilities I have.
So you're going to be meeting up with Rob Godet in the next month or two, right?
With whom?
Rob Godet. He's a Bigfoot chick. Squatch Unlimited, Louisiana. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Nope, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, well then we'll move on from that. The Falcon Project. Let's talk about the Falcon Project. This high-quality blimp that's going to be hopefully making a big change in Bigfooting. What's going on with that?
Well, the initial fundraising effort got off to a disappointing non-start. I was actually kind of surprised by the reaction, as were a number of people. We had some assistance from a professional marketer, and he thought this was a slam dunk proposition, and was dismayed by the lukewarm or ambivalent reception. But there's an important development has occurred that we're pursuing, and that this is an individual came forward, and he has done work with unmanned aerial aircraft, and in fact has several. And he's done contract work with for documentaries. He's done contract work looking for Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan, and so forth, using these various types of unmanned drones. And he has one that, with a command center already equipped, and a nice portable trailer, that he's interested in making a donation to the university. He's done with it, and basically it's just in storage, and he would rather have us utilize it, and of course he garner a tax write-off and through the donation. But we may be in a position here within the next couple of months to have about $500,000 worth of equipment in our pocket, and so then it would just be a matter of cobbling together the corporate sponsorships and individual philanthropists who are kind of in the wings and seeing how this develops.
Is it pretty quiet?
Yes, it's a similar type of an apparatus. It's not the catamaran style.
Okay.
that particular unique design or interesting design that provides a very stable platform. But it's about a 50-foot helium-filled dirigible that will accommodate sufficient payload to allow us to use the high-end thermal imaging and videography equipment that we had intended to. And it's great. I mean, it you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. If this is it has functioned. It's tried and true. It's not a prototype. It's a um, well established design that has been used in many different circumstances. Has most of the same capabilities as the catamaran style blimp would have. So the Falcon project is very much alive, and as you pointed out, I really think this will be a new step. I mean, I think that, and regardless of how the dust settles with the various DNA studies, even if we have a definitive outcome from those studies, uh, that's when the work begins. The DNA can only tell you so much. It can establish the identity or the existence of a little bit about the identity by comparison to other taxa, but it's as far as its behavior and natural history, its range, pattern of activity, those things will only be determined through field observation, and it's not
Right.
going to suddenly become any easier to contact, observe,
Well,
contrary to claims by
with Wookiees,
numerous people.
we got Wookiees. Now we've got the Falcon. I am so excited about this Star Wars reference here. Okay, so Steve Alcorn, you have a question for him from Chris Fleming.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, but the first one from Chris Fleming is, how close are we to seeing the Falcon project come to fruition?
Well, as I said, if this, I'm meeting with the gentleman personally. He's coming to the university, and we're also sitting down with our college development officer, who's the representative from the ISU Foundation. And if it materializes, and if we have an event planned, we had one planned for the end of this month, but our sponsors asked us to push it back a little bit. So we're looking now at May 4th to be an event to be held in Olympia, similar to the program that William Barnes put together in St. George about a year or so ago when he first publicly broached the Falcon Project concept. Or when that comes together, that will be intended to be a fundraising event. That combined with a couple of other initiatives that we've got and a few potential corporate sponsors, I think we'll have enough to provide the operating funds for this first year. We could be in the air in June. So it's like I said, I think it's going to happen this summer.
That's awesome. That's great. We finally have some good news. I think your Falcon project, your field guide, and Bart Coutinho and Tyler Higgins, Sierra's Evidence initiative thing that's going on are the good news of Bigfooting right now, because it's been like a nightmare with the hoaxers and the extortionists and this Daisy and what else has there been? It's it's a circus, and unfortunately you have to go weeding through the circus to get to the good stuff. And you are the end. You are, and I'm saying this for everybody here, you are the end all be all when it comes to Bigfooting. So whenever something outrageous comes out, everyone is waiting for what your response is going to be.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And I strive to try to maintain that posture so that there is some sense of sanity in the mix, and just a sober, objective voice. So hopefully I can continue to live up to that.
So we have a question from J.C. Johnson. He wanted to know if, do you believe, in light of the new DNA testing, that the Snellgrove Lake samples would have stood a better chance of positive identification? I guess they were gathered blood and skin samples from nail boards.
Right.
They were tested for the
Well,
mitochondrial.
there were two factors involved in that, and one is the state of the tissue samples themselves. I mean, when it was explained to me the condition under which these had been left on that nail board, that screw board, leaned up against the cabin year round, so freezing cold in the wintertime, in the blazing sun in the summertime, all the degradation from temperature and UV radiation. I said there's not a snowball chance that there's anything salvageable there. But we want, the producer, Doug Hychek, wanted us to at least go through the motions of discussing what this could have meant and what we might have done had circumstances been more favorable. And that's why it was so intriguing as we're preparing to do this, and I'm looking more closely now at these screws because the thing's right in front of me on the table, and I noticed this, this obvious sort of layered appearance of the residue on these screws, suggesting a layer of adipose tissue, of fatty tissue from the sole pad, and then more bloody muscle tissue, like caught in the threads a bit higher up, and numerous strands of hair that were entangled in the threads of the screws. And I'm thinking, my gosh, this screw has it, and this doesn't, and this doesn't, and this doesn't. What if we connect the dots? And that's where we kind of drew the outline of what looked like the major part of a large, what would have been probably a 16, 18-inch foot that had stepped on those screws, which is obviously bigger than any bear, and so it kind of narrowed it down that maybe there was the Sasquatch stepping on that. And the hair certainly seemed to bear that out. The hair was in morphology and appearance, and it was consistent with the quote gold standard that Henry's kind of set up in diameter and lack of medulla and a worn stepped where worn tip and so on, parallel shaft, and but then we ran into this problem of the outcome. The first tissue sample that was sent to Todd Nissetel was thought to possibly be blood. It had clearly degraded, though, because, to the point where, I wasn't 100% sure that it was blood. It looked almost like paint. And at first blush, he was having difficulty extracting anything from it that would suggest that it was, in fact, blood. But then in follow-up, that's when Kurt Nelson worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. Finally got it purified to the point that you get DNA. But then, when you manipulate, that's the one caveat there, is when you manipulate a sample, the more you work with it, the more you run it out into a gel and try to purify it, re-elute it, and so on. And the more chances there are that it's going to get contaminated. And so when he did a very modest 300 base pairs, there's not a lot you can say about that. It had one substitution that differed from reported sequences for humans that matched, but was common in chimpanzee sequences. So, it's obviously not a chimpanzee, but maybe that's a small segment that is shared in common with great apes and has a variation that differs from humans. Or it's a misread, or it's contaminated and it's a misread. 1 out of 300, you just misidentified what the nucleotide was at that position. So that's why it was so equivocal.
So that brings me to this next question. I'm sorry to interrupt. Sharon Day, she's a paranormal author and researcher, and she wanted to know, was your stand on Sasquatch being an ape?
There's so much misperception. Anymore, I'm always a little gun-shy to say ape versus human, because people have different preconceptions of what the characteristics of those two entities are, and fail also to recognize that there's a lot of potential variation in the space in between those two species, or well, those two groups. If we say, if we limit it to African apes, say for a moment, chimps and gorillas. And so my point has always been that I've seen myself no evidence to suggest anything in anatomy or behavior that can't be accommodated within the normal range of variation, or fairly closely accommodated by the behaviors and anatomies of great apes. Even bipedalism. I mean, gorillas and chimps are facultatively bipedal. They can walk on two legs just fine. And in fact, there are a few individuals who habitually do it, like Oliver, got all kinds of attention, but was just simply a chimpanzee, a very odd chimpanzee in behaviorally. But he preferred to stand upright when he was around people, especially. And but what is there to suggest? I mean, unless you go to the paranormal, unless you place credibility in the testimony of individuals, the very subjective experiences of individuals who claim to be in communication, to have these, higher levels of consciousness experiences with Sasquatch, none of which can be demonstrated, none of which can be replicated. If you eliminate those, then what are you left with? Well, nothing to point to. There's really no good solid evidence yet of language. There's some tentative, suggestive notions that they have some form of verbal communication. But many animals do. That doesn't make you a human. There's no home bases. There's no fire use. There's no clothing. There are no consistent use of modified tools. There's, you just go right down the list. All of those things that we associate with the genus Homo since its appearance, at least 2.5 million years ago, are absent, are altogether absent from it. So if it is a hominid or hominin in the preferred nomenclature today by Clytus, then it's a very early branch of bipedal hominid that preceded the emergence of Homo. Something like I've suggested, and others have suggested before me, robust Australopithecines. Gordon Strausenberg was a champion of that, and it never got a lot of traction in those days because the only known Australopithecines were in Africa, and so you had this choice: Gigantopithecus or robust Australopithecine. Well, in Gigantopithecus, you had an ape that was the right size in the right place at the right time to very, very readily expand its range through
land bridge.
at times when there was contiguous forest across the Bering Land Bridge, through that habitat into North America. With robust Australopithecines, you had to get a smaller hominid from Africa, which was the only place we knew of, all the way through across Asia and up through the Bering Land Bridge and into North America. Now, the discovery of the Hobbit kind of put a whole different spin on that, because the Hobbit is clearly either a very early Homo or late Australopithecine. Meaning it's been around, whether it was in Southeast Asia the whole time, but it's been around for 2 to 3 million years. And so to have gotten to Flores in Indonesia, it had to have expanded its range from Africa into Southeast Asia without leaving any known fossil record at the moment. So if it did that, why not a robust form like Australopithecus boisei, which achieved gigantism?
Dr. Meldrum, there's another animal that has somehow achieved gigantism. We're going to go into Steve Elkhorn's question. Here we go, Steve.
Dr. Meldrum, Justice Smia wanted to know, what is your take on the idea that Bigfoot could be a relative to the giant lemur as suggested by Melba?
Well, where did this question originate?
Justin Smia.
From Justin Smia.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. I'm sorry to laugh. I hate to laugh at it.
Oh, because it's hysterical.
I could not believe statement that she made, that she alluded that, oh, and did you know that there are, I just found out there are lemurs that were 400 to 500 pounds. Did that make them more attractive to a Homo sapiens in Northern Europe 15,000 years ago? She just took a little junket down to Madagascar to hook up with a giant lemur.
I like to move it. I like to move
that was found to become extinct within 5,000 years. So,
oh, God.
In her published paper, there is a very odd phylogram of some kind or another, which includes, for some reason, sequences from autolemur, which is just a galago, one of the galago species, and clearly the sequence data is not reliable because it shows her samples being very closely allied or trending, in her words, towards this autolemur sequence. And she tried to, my listen to one of her interviews suggested that she tried to kind of downplay that by saying that this all eventually gets resolved as we learn more. Well, in other words, that's just a polite way of saying that her data isn't worth anything and is unreliable in its present form, and the discrepancies that are cropping up will be worked out eventually. Well, you don't publish data that is that unreliable, that's giving an obvious contradictory result to well-established phylogenetic relationships based on lots and lots and lots of evidence, So that was a remarkable revelation.
Well, it also makes for very good entertainment.
Well, that's true.
Absolutely.
Team Taser approved!